and welcome. Counsellor Gloria here with you on the Legal Matters. You're so welcome, my dear viewers out there. And today we're going to delve into legal topics that affect everyday lives. As an employee, as an employer, you're all affected by the law. And which law is this? The employment law. Yes, if you didn't know, as a worker out there, that you're actually affected, you have rights as an employee, you have rights as an employer, and all these are governed by the Employment Act. Today we're going to learn more about this. Thank you for joining me here on this show. Yes, so what am I talking about when I talk about the employment law? The employment law is governed by the Employment Act. And this act, that's where we see how the employer is supposed to treat his employees and which rights the employees have. You have a right to salary, you have a right to treatment as an employee if you didn't know. Yes, we have so many laws that govern this whole employment. We have the Occupation and Safety Act, we have the Workers' Compensation Act. All those are laws that govern workers and employees. So if you're out there and you didn't know your rights, abakozi mwenna abadde obadde tomanyi rights zo ng'omukozi, leero twagala tuzisomeko oziyige. Kati leero tugenda kwogerako ku Employment Act. Tulinayo n'endala. We have the Occupational and Safety Act, we have the Workers' Compensation Act, but today we're going to dwell more on the Employment Act. And what do I mean by this? So this is an act that governs all employees. Yes, if you're under an employment contract, this is the act that governs you. This is the act that tells you what are your rights as an employee. Yes, and in this act, it defines as an employee as a person who is working under an employment contract. We have two different kinds of employees. We have a worker who is under an employment contract, and we have someone who is just working on a part-time basis. Yes, this is a person who is not fully employed by an employer under the Employment Act, but there are rather people who are working as a contractor, as an independent contractor. Yes, I can be an employer, and I'm like, let's say at YPA, Youth Platform Africa, where we are right now, and I have employees, and at the same time, I can employ an independent contractor, someone who can come and maybe construct this beautiful restaurant that you see here with us. Yes, so this Employment Act in particular governs employees of Youth Platform Africa and not the independent contractors who come on a part-time basis to come and work. So hope that is very clear. As an employee, what are your rights? First of all, you have to enter an employment contract. Yes, as an employee, you're not supposed to work for anyone without this particular contract because it has all the terms and conditions that you're going to work under. It's going to state what your salary will be, what time of the day you're going to work. Yes, it's going to define all the terms that you're going to work under and what are your exact duties as an employee, which department are you going to work under. All your duties have to be clearly stated in that employment contract. Yes, if you're out there and you're working with someone you don't really know whether you're on full-time basis, whether you're on part-time basis, it's very important and very keen as an employee to enter this employment contract. So I want to advise all the employees out there, you have to enter this employment contract in particular. And why is this so important? Because it's going to state, in case there are disputes between you and your employer, how are you going to resolve these issues? That's where the clause on dispute resolution will come in. Will you go to court straight? Will you come to table with your employer to solve the matter amicably? And that's through mediation. And you have to know the steps to take in case of any disputes between you and your employer. In case of termination, do you know your rights? Which right procedure an employer is supposed to go through before they even terminate you? All that is going to be encompassed in the employment act, in the employment contract. Sorry. So our viewers out there, please feel free to know that as an employee, you're entitled to know how much you're going to earn. Yes, that's the clause on salary. You understand your wages. When you're supposed to get this payment at the end of the month, which exact date you're going to get this payment, and how much are you getting, and which deductions are the statutory deductions are supposed to be cut on this salary. Because you may be out there, you're earning 700,000, you're expecting 700,000 at the end of the month, and yet the NSSF Act says that your employer is supposed to deduct a 5% contribution from your salary. Yes, you're not going to expect your full amount, so you're supposed to contribute 5%, and your employer is supposed to contribute also a percentage which is not more than 15% on your NSSF. So if you're out there and you didn't know this, know that your salary, they have to deduct that NSSF contribution every month, and also the tax income, the employee tax income. So when your salary comes at the end of the month and you're wondering, why don't I have my full salary? Please know that your employer has deducted the statutory deductions as they're supposed to be deducted from your salaries. Yes. So your employment contract has to define all those terms very clearly and explicitly in your contract. And then we also have your days of work. Which days are you supposed to be at work? So here at YPA, Youth Platform Africa, we are a Seventh-day Adventist company. We don't work on Saturdays. So our contract clearly states that on Saturdays, it's a resting day as a Sabbath, so we don't work. And yet on the other days, from Monday to Friday, our contracts clearly state we are supposed to be at work from 7:45 a.m. up to 6 p.m. Yes, it clearly states from Monday to Friday. Actually, it's from Sunday to Friday. All that has to be clearly stated in your employment contract, because all these are terms and conditions. As an employee, you're supposed to know how the company is run, because it's this employment contract that's going to guide us in how the company is supposed to run and how you're supposed to conduct yourself as an employee. So if you don't show up here at the right time, there are so many consequences. And when they deduct your salary as a penalty, you shouldn't go out there and be like, no, they've deducted my salary. No, it's your employment contract at the end of the day that's going to govern how you're supposed to conduct yourself at the place of work. And in this employment contract, we also have what we call the safety clause. Yes, as an employee, you're supposed to be, your safety is supposed to be ensured. You see? Now, like, let's say people who work in the factories, they're supposed to be given safety gear. You remember in COVID-19, there was a scenario where the medical personnel had to be given safety gears, they had to be protected with gloves, they had to be given masks. All that your employer is supposed to ensure that you're safe at the workplace. And if this is not followed as per the law, your employer is supposed to be penalized in case you get any disease during your course of work. Yes? So all that has to all be governed in the employment contract. So when your employer tells you, like, you have to wear this gear to protect yourself, you have to wear the masks, you have to wear this or that, all that is for your safety. Yes, and if you, in case of any problem and you've not followed what the employment contract says, then the employer is not supposed to be penalized in that instance. It's all on you. Yes. And another thing, as an employee, you're supposed to know how to dress. Yes, and so many companies have their dress codes at this place of work. You're not going to just show up as in whichever dress code you want, in pajamas, just because you have to be at work. No, there is a guideline that governs you on how to dress. We have a dress code. We have to come wearing suits every Monday, and we have our uniforms as YPA. You will see our shirts with time. Yes, all those are laws. All those are procedures that are supposed to be followed by an employee. You've seen officers out there. You've seen police officers. You've seen so many professionals out there. You've seen the lawyers, the judges, how they dress. And you've also seen how professional they have to be at their places of work. So all this is governed under the Employment Act, the employment contract. You're not supposed to show up at the workplace just dressed in any way just because you're supposed to come to work, so you show up in any way. You have to come when you're very decently dressed, yes, as an employee, because you're representing the company. So the picture you put out there is what is going to sell your company. It's why it's going to show that you're actually a professional. Yes. Also, as an employee, you have to know the policies, the values, the values of the company. At YPA, we have godly values, godly ways. You have to keep time respect. You have to know all these policies of the company. Yes, all that is guided by the Human Resource Department. And in case you're an employee out there and you don't know the values you're supposed to follow as an employee at your workplace, please approach the head of department of the human resource or the human resource manager. They'll guide you on all those policies, on what you're supposed to follow in your particular company. Yes, and we also have the clause to do with termination, which is very important in every employment contract. Yes, if you're out there and you sign an employment contract which does not talk about how you're supposed to be terminated from your place of work, because we have different, as provided in the Employment Act, we have different ways of terminating this contract. For such as if your contract has expired, let's say your contract is supposed to run for a year or supposed to run for 2 years, and this year has expired, you as an employee, you're supposed to approach the human resource and maybe apply for renewal of your contract. Yes, so there that the contract automatically terminates in case you don't even approach the human resource to renew your contract. Yes, if you're out there and your contract is soon expiring, please approach your human resource for a way forward. Another way it can terminate is by death. Remember, anytime you can die, so the moment you die, your contract is terminated. Another way it can be terminated is through gross misconduct. When you come to work drunk, when you're misbehaving, you're not handling the clients well, all that will lead to termination of your contract. And what do I mean by this? There are so many ways they can terminate this contract, either summarily, and here they don't give you any notice of you having misbehaved. You automatically have to leave the company. In case you've misbehaved to a certain extent, they cannot take it. You're fighting at work, you're coming to work drunk, all that cannot be acceptable. So you'll be summarily terminated. So keep watch of that kind of behavior as an employee. Your employer will terminate you without any notice, and they'll just terminate you, and of which you don't have any sort of recourse if you're terminated like that. Yes, you can also be terminated if you as an employee, you're done with working, you want to retire, maybe you've reached your age limit. You can write to your employer to notify them. You give them a notice. It depends on how long you've worked for this company. If you work for a year, of course, you give them like a 3 weeks notice or a month's notice is sufficient to let your employer know that you're actually leaving. So you don't just walk away from the company just because you've finished and you're retiring. No, you have to notify your employer so that they can get a replacement for you. You have to put in that notice. You have to hand over office like in a professional way. As an employee out there, please be professional. You notify your employer, you tell them on this and this date, effective 7th of this date of this year, I'll be ending my employment with this company, and which is very okay. So you can also end your employment like that. Yes, as an employee, yes, you're also entitled to know in case your employer has terminated you summarily and you don't have anywhere to go and you don't understand, like maybe you've not done anything bad or you've not misbehaved in any way, but they've just summarily terminated you. You need to know the procedures to take. What can you do as an employee who has been engraved like that? What do you do? Where do you go? Exactly, like in case your employment contract has just been ended without any sort of notice to you. So what I can advise you out there, in case you're in this kind of scenario, in this kind of quagmire as an employee, what you can do is that you can write or you can approach the labor officer nearby you, any labor offices, KCCA offices for Kampala. Yes, you can approach any labor office. You write to them your grievance, notifying the labor officer what happened exactly. You can write a letter notifying them, like, I've been summarily terminated by my employer without any formal notice. You set your grounds of why you're bringing your employer to the labor office. Yes, you've been summarily terminated, you've not been given any notice, you've not been paid in lieu of notice. Yes, So please know your rights, approach the labor officer, you state your case, you're like, I've been working for this company for this time for over 20 years, and out of the blue, I've been summarily terminated without any sort of notice, which is not right. So you approach them, you notify them, and then the labor officer will notify the employer. Yes, they'll write to the employer, asking them to come to the labor offices, because right now we don't want any backlog of cases. We first approach the labor office. That's why we have to go through these procedures. And how do they mitigate such cases? We go through mediation, where you sit with your former employer and you sit as an employee to state your case, to state that I've been working as an employee, I've been working for all this time, I've not been given any notice of termination, I've just been fired from my job. Yes, you can state all those grounds with your employer seated, and he also states his ground. It's like this and this and this. Maybe the employer acted like this, and then they didn't follow they violated the employment contract. So that all that is actually mitigated upon. So the labor officer can mediate between these two parties to see how to resolve the matter without going to court, because court is a whole other process which is so expensive, first of all, which is time consuming. So to see to it that you get your rights as an employee, to see that you're compensated, you just reach the labor office, where they can guide you on how to actually get compensated from this employer, because some of the ways you can get recourse is through compensation for damages. Yes, damages for having been fired without any sort of notice. You can get payment in lieu of the notice. Instead of getting the notice, you would have been paid. So all that is followed in the labor office, where the labor officer can instruct the employer to actually follow procedure on how to fire this particular employer, whether they take it to the disciplinary committee to state your case, to have a fair hearing, because before even they fire you, you're supposed to go through a fair hearing where you have your legal representatives, if you have, and you also state your case so that they hear you out before they can terminate you. Whether you've been summarily terminated, you're entitled to this fair hearing. So all my viewers out there, in case you've been aggrieved by your employer, please approach the labor offices. You'll be guided on how to actually get compensation, or to get relief, yes, from how you've been terminated from your place of work. There are people who have been terminated, you've not gotten your NSSF. How do you approach this kind of grievance? Where do you go exactly? So all employment matters are governed by the Employment Act. So the first recourse you have to approach is the labor office. So even before you think of court or going to wherever you want to think of, first approach the labor office and get guidance and go through mediation, where you're going to sit with your boss, your former employer, and see to it that you resolve these issues, even without going further to court. You see? Because it's going to consume a lot of money and a lot of time, which will not really help you or your employer either. So if the matter is not resolved amicably at the labor's office, what happens next? So this matter you apply to the labor officer to see to it that it's further forwarded or it's transferred to the industrial court. So in the industrial court, that's where your matter is going to be referred, so that the matter is actually resolved. If the employer is not being receptive, they're not really trying to cooperate with you at the labor office, then you can go further to the labor court with your legal representative, or you can still represent yourself and take your employer to court. There are so many cases that we have against so many employers. There are so many employers out there who have been taken to the industrial court, where the people get compensation. Yes, in case they are summarily dismissed, in case they are dismissed without their NSSF areas, without their NSSF, they approach the industrial court and then they put out their grievances. You petition court. You put in your plaint. Yes, how you go to court is you put in your plaint stating your grounds on how you are terminated without any sort of notice, without anything, like you are illegally terminated, unlawfully terminated, if I may put it. So you approach the industrial court to get compensation, and we've seen so many people out there who have actually been able to get they've been able to get relief from court. So employees out there, please don't miss out on all this advice on how you can actually be helped as an employee. And also employers out there, your employees are coming to work, so you have to look out for them. As an employer, you're supposed to follow all the guidelines in the Occupational and Safety Act. You're supposed to compensate this worker, a worker who was sent on an assignment to go and do work somewhere, and unfortunately they get involved in an accident. Yes, all those employees are supposed to be compensated. As an employer out there, did you know that you're supposed to compensate this employer? Because actually they are going to execute an assignment that you had sent them on during their course of employment, and they've encountered this accident. So as an employer, you're supposed to compensate this employee under the Workers' Compensation Act. Yes, so all employers, see to it that you go through that act to see how you can compensate this particular employee. So even independent contractors, you're supposed to also know, you're supposed to enter a contract. It's not necessarily an employment contract, but you're supposed to enter a mini contract with this employer on how you're going to be working. As an independent contractor, you're supposed to know the time of work you're going to work, the form of payment you're going to be getting, and when are you getting this payment? Is it on a weekly basis? Is it on a monthly basis? So as an independent contractor, you're supposed to know, you're supposed to enter this contract. Yes, you may not be under the employment contract per se, but as an independent contractor, you enter this contract. So it comes back to how you've been conducting yourselves. It can come to an implied contract by conduct. Has this employer been telling you to come to work? Which hours have they been telling you? When did they pay you? Is there salary coming in on your account?
At first.
So if you have all that proof, then that shows that there was some sort of verbal agreement between.
What if the money they pay me doesn't go in my account?
So how have you been receiving this particular money? Can you link the money to the employer? That this money has been paid by this employer, it has been deposited by the employer. So through all that conduct, yes, there is no written agreement. It can be got from an implied verbal contract. All our viewers out there, thank you so much. In case you have any more questions, anything to do with the law, to do with your form of employment, please don't look further. Cancionissima Gloria has got you in case you need more legal advice. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.